Maya Chen had been living on the streets of Seattle for 8 months now. At 19, she had already experienced more hardship than most people face in a lifetime. Her parents had died in a house fire when she was 17, and, without any relatives willing to take her in, she had aged out of the foster care system with nothing but a worn backpack and $43 to her name. The rain was coming down hard that October night, turning the city streets into rivers of cold water. Maya huddled under the concrete bridge near Pike Place Market, her thin jacket doing little to keep out the bitter wind. She clutched her thermos of lukewarm coffee, the last bit of warmth she had left. Her stomach growled loudly, reminding her that she hadn't eaten anything substantial in 2 days. As the storm intensified, Maya noticed the headlights of a car swerving wildly on the road above. The vehicle was moving too fast for the slick conditions, and she watched in horror as it crashed through the guardrail and plunged toward the swollen river below. Without thinking, Maya dropped her thermos and ran toward the embankment. The black sedan had landed partially in the water, its front end submerged and sinking fast. Steam rose from the engine as the current began to pull the car deeper. Maya could see a figure slumped over the steering wheel inside. Most people would have called for help and waited, but Maya had learned that sometimes waiting meant the difference between life and death. She kicked off her worn sneakers and waded into the freezing water. The current was stronger than she had anticipated, and she had to fight to keep her footing on the muddy river bottom. The water reached her waist as she approached the car, and she could see that the driver was unconscious, blood trickling from a cut on his forehead. The man inside looked to be in his 30s, with sharp, aristocratic features and dark hair. He was dressed in an expensive suit that seemed out of place in this part of town. Maya tried the door handle, but it was jammed. The water was rising quickly, already reaching the bottom of the windows. Using a rock from the riverbed, Maya smashed the passenger side window. Glass scattered into the water as she reached inside to unlock the door. The unconscious man was heavy, much heavier than his lean frame suggested, but adrenaline gave Maya the strength she needed. She managed to drag him from the sinking vehicle just as the roof disappeared beneath the dark water. Getting the stranger to shore was the hardest part. Maya had to rest twice, pulling him onto shallow rocks to catch her breath. By the time she finally dragged him onto the muddy bank, both of them were soaked and shivering. The man's skin was pale, almost translucent in the dim light from the street lamps above. Maya checked for a pulse and found one, though it seemed unusually slow and weak. His breathing was shallow but steady. She noticed something odd about his appearance up close. Despite being unconscious from a car accident, his skin looked flawless, almost porcelain-like. His fingernails were longer than normal, and, when she checked his pupils with her phone's flashlight, she saw that his eyes were an unusual shade of deep amber. Not knowing what else to do, Maya dragged the man to her makeshift shelter under the bridge. She had collected some old blankets and cardboard over the months, creating a small dry space where she could escape the worst of the weather. She covered the stranger with her driest blanket and built a small fire using some old newspapers and broken wooden crates she had scavenged. As the fire crackled to life, Maya got her first really good look at the man she had saved. His features were striking, almost supernaturally beautiful. His dark hair was slightly wavy, and, even unconscious, there was something regal about his bearing. The expensive watch on his wrist and the quality of his clothing suggested he was wealthy, which made Maya wonder what he had been doing in this rough part of the city. Hours passed as Maya kept watch over the stranger. She fed the fire and tried to keep him warm, even though it meant using up her carefully hoarded supply of fuel. Around 3 in the morning, she noticed his breathing becoming more regular, and his skin seemed to be regaining some color, though it remained unnaturally pale. The man's eyes suddenly snapped open, and Maya jumped back in surprise. Those amber eyes fixed on her with an intensity that made her heart race. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Then, the man sat up slowly, moving with a fluid grace that seemed impossible for someone who had just been in a serious accident. "You saved me," he said, his voice deep and carrying a slight accent that Maya couldn't place. It sounded European, but older somehow, as if English wasn't his first language even though he spoke it perfectly. "I couldn't just let you drown," Maya replied, suddenly, self-conscious about her appearance. She was aware of how she must look, with her dirty clothes and tangled hair, sitting across from this obviously wealthy and sophisticated man. The stranger studied her face in the firelight, his expression unreadable. What is your name? He asked. Maya, she answered. Maya Chen. What's yours? The man was quiet for a long moment, as if deciding how much to tell her. You may call me Adrian, he finally said. Adrian Blackwood. Are you hurt? Should I call an ambulance? Maya asked, though she knew she couldn't afford to get involved with hospitals and authorities. Her illegal camping under the bridge would certainly be discovered. Adrian shook his head slowly. That won't be necessary. I heal, quickly. As he spoke, Maya noticed that the cut on his forehead had already stopped bleeding and seemed to be closing on its own. That's impossible, she whispered, leaning closer to get a better look. Adrian's eyes darkened. Perhaps you are simply tired and not seeing clearly. It has been a traumatic night. Maya knew what she had seen, but she didn't argue. Instead, she handed him a bottle of water from her small stash of supplies. You should drink something. You've been unconscious for hours. Adrian accepted the water but didn't drink. He continued to watch Maya with those strange amber eyes, as if he was trying to solve a puzzle. You live here, he observed, gesturing to the makeshift shelter around them. Maya felt her cheeks burn with embarrassment. It's temporary, she said quickly. I'm just between places right now. How long have you been between places? Adrian asked, and there was something gentle in his tone that made Maya's defenses crumble slightly. 8 months, she admitted quietly. Maybe 9. I kind of lost track. Adrian's expression changed, becoming more serious. You are very young to be alone on the streets. I'm 19, Maya said defensively. And I can take care of myself. I just proved that by saving your life. Indeed you did, Adrian agreed. And I find myself in your debt. Something about the formal way he spoke made Maya curious. Where are you from originally? Your accent is interesting. Adrian was quiet for so long that Maya thought he wasn't going to answer. When he finally spoke, his voice was careful and measured. I have lived in many places over the years. I tend to move around frequently. The fire was burning low, and Maya added another piece of wood to keep it going. What were you doing in this part of town? It's not exactly where someone like you would normally be. Someone like me? Adrian asked, raising an eyebrow. You know, wealthy. Successful. Your suit probably costs more than I've seen in the last year. Maya gestured to his expensive clothing, which was now wrinkled and damp but still obviously high quality. I had business in the area, Adrian said vaguely. Though I must admit, the storm made driving treacherous. I should have been more careful. Maya noticed that despite having been unconscious in freezing water for hours, Adrian didn't seem cold at all. He wasn't shivering, and his lips weren't blue like hers were. It was as if the temperature didn't affect him the same way it affected normal people. Are you sure you're not hurt? She asked again. You were underwater for a while before I could get to you. I am certain, Adrian replied firmly. Though I am curious about you, Maya Chen. What led you to this situation? Maya looked down at her hands, which were still trembling slightly from the cold and adrenaline. She rarely talked about her past with anyone, but something about Adrian made her feel like she could trust him. Maybe it was because she had just saved his life, or maybe it was the way he looked at her without judgment despite her obvious circumstances. My parents died in a fire, she said quietly. I had nowhere to go and no money for college or an apartment. I've been trying to save up enough to get back on my feet, but it's harder than you'd think when you don't have an address or a phone number for job applications. Adrian listened intently, his amber eyes never leaving her face. You have no other family? Maya shook her head. My parents were immigrants from China. Their families disowned them for moving to America, and my dad's parents died before I was born. I have some cousins somewhere, but we never stayed in touch. And you have been surviving out here alone for nearly a year, Adrian said, and there was something like admiration in his voice. I do what I have to do, Maya said with a shrug, trying to sound tougher than she felt. Adrian stood up suddenly, moving with that same fluid grace she had noticed before. He was taller than she had realized, and, in the flickering firelight, his presence seemed to fill the small shelter. "I believe I owe you a debt that cannot be easily repaid." "You don't owe me anything," Maya protested. "Anyone would have done the same thing." Adrian's smile was slight but seemed genuine. "I think you would be surprised by how few people would risk their own safety for a stranger. Especially when that stranger appears to have far more resources than they do." Maya felt uncomfortable with the gratitude in his voice. She had acted on instinct, not expecting anything in return. "Really, it's fine. I'm just glad you're okay." "Nevertheless," Adrian said formally, "I would like to offer you something in return for what you have done." Maya was about to protest again when she realized that Adrian was reaching into his jacket pocket. For a moment, she wondered if he was going to pull out money, which would be both insulting and desperately needed. Instead, he withdrew what looked like an old business card. "I own several properties in the city," he said, holding out the card. "Many of them are currently vacant. You are welcome to stay in one of them while you get back on your feet." Maya stared at the card without taking it. "I can't accept that. I don't even know you." "You saved my life," Adrian said simply. "Without your intervention, I would have drowned tonight. Surely that creates some level of trust between us." The offer was tempting, more tempting than Maya wanted to admit. The thought of having a real roof over her head, of being able to shower and sleep in an actual bed, was almost overwhelming. But she had learned to be suspicious of offers that seemed too good to be true. "What would you want in return?" she asked cautiously. Adrian's expression was unreadable. "Nothing beyond what you have already given me. Consider it a gift with no strings attached." Maya looked at the card again. In the firelight, she could make out an address in one of the better neighborhoods in Seattle. It seemed impossible that this stranger would offer her such generosity, but the sincerity in his amber eyes made her want to believe him. "I don't understand why you would do this for someone you just met," she said honestly. Adrian was quiet for a moment, staring into the fire. When he spoke, his voice was soft and carried a weight that suggested old pain. "Perhaps because I know what it is like to be alone in the world with nowhere to turn." Something in his tone made Maya look at him more closely. Despite his expensive clothes and obvious wealth, there was a loneliness in Adrian's eyes that she recognized. It was the same hollow feeling she carried with her every day. "How long have you been alone?" she asked gently. Adrian's smile was sad and distant. "Longer than you might imagine." Before Maya could ask what he meant, Adrian stood and walked to the edge of the shelter. The rain had stopped, and the first hints of dawn were beginning to lighten the sky to the east. "I should go," he said, turning back to her. "But the offer stands. The address on the card will lead you to a small apartment building I own. Tell the manager, Mrs. Rodriguez, that you are there on my behalf. She will give you a key to one of the units." "I still can't accept this," Maya said, though her conviction was weakening. "Then, consider it a loan," Adrian suggested. "Stay until you find work and can afford your own place. When you are ready to leave, simply go. No questions asked, no debt owed." Maya took the card with trembling fingers. The cardstock was thick and expensive, and the address was embossed in gold letters. It felt real, which made the whole situation even more surreal. "Why are you being so kind to me?" she asked. Adrian paused at the edge of the shelter, his tall frame silhouetted against the growing light. "Perhaps because kindness is so rare in this world that when we encounter it, we should nurture it however we can." "Will I see you again?" Maya asked, surprised by her own disappointment at the thought of him leaving. "Perhaps," Adrian said, and there was something mysterious in his tone. "If you truly wish it." With that, he walked away into the early morning light, leaving Maya alone under the bridge with a business card that felt like a lifeline and a dozen questions she hadn't thought to ask. As she watched his figure disappear into the distance, she noticed that he moved differently than normal people, with a grace and silence that seemed almost supernatural. Maya looked down at the card again, reading the address by the growing daylight. Part of her was convinced this had all been a strange dream brought on by exhaustion and hunger. But the card was real in her hands, and her clothes were still damp from her rescue mission. Adrian Blackwood, whoever he really was, had just changed her life completely. She gathered her few belongings and extinguished the fire, then began the long walk to the address on the card. As she walked through the empty streets of Seattle, Maya couldn't shake the feeling that her encounter with Adrian had been far more significant than just a random act of heroism. There had been something different about him, something that went beyond his unusual appearance and formal way of speaking. The apartment building was in a quiet neighborhood filled with tree-lined streets and well-maintained buildings. It was the kind of place Maya had always imagined living when she was younger and still believed in fairy tale endings. The building itself was older but elegant, with ivy growing up the brick walls and flower boxes in the windows. Maya stood outside for several minutes, gathering her courage. This felt too good to be true, and she was terrified that Mrs. Rodriguez would laugh at her or call the police. But the memory of Adrian's amber eyes and his sincere gratitude gave her the strength to walk up to the front door and ring the bell. Mrs. Rodriguez turned out to be a kind-faced woman in her 60s who spoke with a slight Spanish accent. When Maya mentioned Adrian's name and showed her the card, the woman's demeanor immediately became welcoming and respectful. "Ah, Senor Blackwood called about you," Mrs. Rodriguez said, leading Maya up a narrow staircase to the second floor. "He said you were to have apartment 2B for as long as you needed it." Maya was surprised. "He called? When?" "Just an hour ago," Mrs. Rodriguez replied, fishing a key from her pocket. "He said you had done him a great service and that we were to treat you as an honored guest." The apartment was small but perfect. It had a tiny kitchen, a living room with a comfortable couch, one bedroom, and a bathroom with an actual bathtub. After months of washing in public restroom sinks and sleeping on concrete, it felt like a palace. "There are clean linens in the closet," Mrs. Rodriguez said kindly, "and I took the liberty of stocking the refrigerator with some basic groceries. Senor Blackwood was very specific that you should want for nothing." After Mrs. Rodriguez left, Maya stood in the middle of the apartment and tried to process what was happening. Less than 12 hours ago, she had been homeless and hopeless. Now she had a roof over her head and food in the refrigerator, all because she had pulled a stranger from a sinking car. She ran a hot bath and soaked in the tub until her fingers were wrinkled and her skin was pink from the heat. Then, she put on the clean clothes she found in the bedroom dresser, which fit her perfectly despite the fact that Adrian had never asked her size. Finally, she ate her first real meal in days, savoring every bite of the fresh bread and cheese Mrs. Rodriguez had provided. As night fell, Maya sat by the window looking out at the city lights and thinking about Adrian Blackwood. There were so many things about him that didn't make sense. How had he called Mrs. Rodriguez when he didn't have a phone with him after the accident? How had he known her size for the clothes? And why hadn't he seemed affected by the cold water and hours of unconsciousness? Most puzzling of all was the way he had looked at her, as if she was something precious and rare. Maya had grown used to being invisible on the streets, just another homeless person that most people avoided looking at. But Adrian had seen her, really seen her, and had treated her with a respect and kindness she hadn't experienced since her parents died. As she drifted off to sleep in an actual bed for the first time in months, Maya found herself hoping that she would see Adrian again soon. She wanted to thank him properly for his generosity, but, more than that, she wanted to understand who he really was and why their brief encounter had felt so significant. What Maya didn't know was that Adrian Blackwood was at that very moment standing in the shadows across the street from her building, watching her silhouetted figure in the window. His amber eyes glowed slightly in the darkness as he made sure she was safe and settled for the night. Adrian had lived for over 6 centuries, and, in all that time, he had rarely encountered the kind of selfless courage Maya had shown. Most humans were driven by self-interest and fear, but this young woman had risked her life to save a complete stranger without thought of reward. It was a reminder that despite all the darkness he had witnessed over the centuries, there was still goodness in the world worth protecting. As he turned to leave, Adrian's phone buzzed with a text message. The sender was listed only as counsel, and the message was brief but ominous: "The girl cannot know what you are. Handle this carefully, or we will handle it for you." Adrian deleted the message without responding, his expression grim. The vampire council had been monitoring him for decades, always suspicious of his interactions with humans. They viewed humans as either food or threats, never as equals worthy of respect or protection. But Maya was different, and Adrian was determined to keep her safe from his world, even if it meant defying the council's implicit warnings. For now, it was enough that she was warm and fed and safe. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, but tonight, Maya Chen was sleeping peacefully for the first time in months, unaware that her simple act of heroism had just entangled her life with forces far more dangerous and ancient than she could imagine. Maya had been living in the apartment for 2 weeks when strange things started happening. It began with small details she might have dismissed if she hadn't been paying attention. The groceries in her refrigerator were replaced every few days while she was out looking for work, always with exactly the food she preferred. Her laundry disappeared from the building's basement and reappeared in her dresser, clean and perfectly folded. When she mentioned to Mrs. Rodriguez that the bathroom faucet was dripping, it was fixed the next day by a repair service she hadn't called. Someone was watching over her, and Maya was fairly certain she knew who it was. She had tried calling the number on Adrian's business card several times, but it always went to voicemail. His voice on the recording was the same deep, accented tone she remembered from that night under the bridge, but he never returned her calls. Maya began to wonder if their encounter had meant less to him than it had to her. The job search wasn't going well. Despite having an address now, Maya's lack of work history and education beyond high school made finding employment difficult. She had managed to get a few interviews at local restaurants and retail stores, but nothing had panned out yet. Each rejection made her more grateful for Adrian's generosity and more determined to find a way to repay him. One evening, as Maya was walking home from another unsuccessful job interview, she noticed a man following her. He was tall and pale, with the same aristocratic bearing she had noticed in Adrian, but there was something menacing about his presence. His eyes, when she caught a glimpse of them in the reflection of a storefront window, seemed to glow with an unnatural light. Maya quickened her pace, but the man matched her speed effortlessly. When she turned down a side street hoping to lose him, he was somehow already there waiting for her. The impossibility of it made her heart race with fear. "Maya Chen," the man said, and his voice was cultured and cold. "You have become quite the topic of conversation in certain circles." "I don't know what you're talking about," Maya replied, trying to keep her voice steady as she looked for an escape route. "Oh, but I think you do," the man said, stepping closer. In the dim streetlight, Maya could see that his skin had the same porcelain quality as Adrian's, and his fingernails were long and sharp. "You saved someone very important recently. Someone who should have been more careful about exposing our kind to human attention." "Our kind?" Maya repeated, confused and frightened. The man smiled, revealing teeth that were too white and too sharp. "Vampires, my dear girl. Ancient beings that your kind tells stories about to frighten children. Though I assure you, the reality is far more dangerous than any fairy tale." Maya's first instinct was to laugh at the absurdity of what he was saying, but something in his eyes made the laughter die in her throat. The way he moved, the supernatural grace she had noticed in Adrian, the pale skin and unusual eyes, suddenly, everything started to make a terrible kind of sense. "You're insane," she whispered, but even as she said it, she knew it wasn't true. "Am I?" the man asked, and, faster than Maya could follow, he was suddenly standing directly in front of her, having moved several feet in the blink of an eye. "Or are you finally beginning to understand exactly what you rescued from that river?" Maya's mind raced back to that night under the bridge. Adrian's impossible beauty, the way his wounds had healed almost instantly, his lack of reaction to the cold water, the formal way he spoke as if he came from another era entirely. The pieces of the puzzle were falling into place, creating a picture she didn't want to accept. "Adrian is a vampire," she said slowly, the words feeling strange on her tongue. "Adrian Blackwood is not just a vampire," the man corrected with obvious disdain. "He is one of the oldest and most powerful of our kind. A vampire king who has ruled over our people for centuries. And you, little human, have complicated his existence considerably." "I don't understand," Maya said, her back pressed against the brick wall behind her. "The council that governs our kind has very strict rules about human contact," the man explained, circling her like a predator. "We are not supposed to form attachments to your species. Humans are food, nothing more. But Adrian seems to have developed a fondness for you that concerns the council greatly." "I haven't seen him since that night," Maya protested. "He gave me a place to stay and then disappeared. I've been trying to contact him for weeks. Oh, but he has been watching you, the man said with a cruel smile. Every day, every night. He has been ensuring your safety and comfort from the shadows. The council finds this behavior quite troubling. Maya's heart was pounding so hard she was sure the man could hear it. What do you want from me? The council has sent me to deliver a message, the man said, leaning closer until she could feel his cold breath on her face. You are to disappear from Seattle immediately. Leave the apartment, forget about Adrian Blackwood, and never speak of vampires to anyone. If you comply, you will be allowed to live your human life in peace. And if I don't? Maya asked, though she wasn't sure she wanted to hear the answer. The man's smile widened, showing more of those razor-sharp teeth. Then, the council will solve the problem permanently. And, believe me, my dear, you would not enjoy their methods. Before Maya could respond, a familiar voice cut through the darkness like a blade. Touch her, Marcus, and you will answer to me personally. Adrian stepped out of the shadows at the end of the alley, and Maya's breath caught in her throat. He looked exactly the same as he had that night by the river, but now she was seeing him with new eyes. His movements were too fluid, too graceful for a human. His amber eyes seemed to glow with their own light, and there was an aura of power around him that she had somehow missed before. Marcus, the vampire who had been threatening her, immediately stepped away from Maya and bowed his head slightly. Adrian. The council sent me to handle this situation quietly. The council oversteps its bounds, Adrian replied, his voice carrying an authority that made Marcus flinch. This human is under my protection. She knows what we are, Marcus said. The law is clear about humans who discover our existence. The law, Adrian said coldly, was written by the council, not by me. And I am still king, whether they choose to remember it or not. Maya watched this exchange with growing amazement and terror. The formal way they spoke to each other, the obvious hierarchy between them, and, most importantly, the casual way they discussed killing her for simply knowing the truth, it all confirmed what she was still struggling to accept. Maya, Adrian said, turning his attention to her without taking his eyes completely off Marcus. Are you harmed? No, she managed to say, her voice barely above a whisper. But, Adrian, is it true? Are you really a vampire? Adrian finished for her. Yes. I should have told you sooner, but I was hoping to find a way to keep you safe without burdening you with this knowledge. The council will not be pleased that you have confirmed their suspicions, Marcus warned. This human now knows too much to be allowed to live freely. Adrian's expression darkened, and, for the first time since Maya had known him, he looked truly dangerous. The council will do nothing without my permission. I am not some fledgling vampire to be ordered around by their fear and prejudice. You have not ruled actively for over a century, Marcus countered. Many question whether your authority still holds weight. Then, perhaps it is time I reminded them, Adrian said, and there was something in his voice that made both Maya and Marcus step back instinctively. Maya found her voice, though it shook as she spoke. I don't understand any of this. You're telling me that vampires are real, that Adrian is some kind of vampire king, and that there's a council that wants to kill me for knowing about it? That is an accurate summary, Adrian said, his tone becoming gentler as he addressed her. Though I should clarify that I will not allow any harm to come to you, regardless of what the council wishes. Why? Maya asked. Why would you risk angering these powerful vampires for someone like me? Adrian looked at her for a long moment, and Maya saw something vulnerable in his amber eyes. Because in 6 centuries of existence, I have never encountered a human who would risk their life for a stranger without thought of reward. Your compassion and courage are rare gifts in this world, Maya, and they deserve to be protected. Marcus made a sound of disgust. Sentiment makes you weak, Adrian. The council is right to be concerned about your judgment. My judgment, Adrian said sharply, kept our people hidden and safe for 500 years while I ruled actively. I stepped back from daily governance because I grew tired of the politics and petty squabbles, not because I was incapable of leadership. Then, lead, Marcus challenged. Make the hard decision. This human cannot be allowed to expose our existence to her kind. Maya will not expose us, Adrian said confidently. She understands the importance of keeping this secret. Don't you, Maya? Maya nodded quickly. I won't tell anyone. I promise. I just want to understand what's happening to my life. What's happening, Adrian explained patiently, is that you performed an act of kindness that saved the life of someone very old and very powerful. In return, I have tried to help you build a better life for yourself. Unfortunately, my people view any close contact with humans as dangerous and problematic. Because you might fall in love with her, Marcus said with obvious contempt. Because you might choose a mortal human over your immortal responsibilities. Adrian's expression became unreadable. That is the council's fear, yes. Is it possible? Maya asked quietly. Could someone like you feel that way about someone like me? The question hung in the air between them, and Maya immediately regretted asking it. But she needed to know where she stood in this dangerous new world she had stumbled into. It is possible, Adrian admitted after a long pause. Which is precisely why the council views you as a threat. Marcus laughed coldly. How noble. The great vampire king, brought low by a homeless human girl. The council will be fascinated to hear how far you have fallen. Tell the council, Adrian said, his voice deadly quiet, that I will meet with them tomorrow night to discuss this situation. But, until that meeting, Maya remains under my protection. If any harm comes to her, I will hold the entire council responsible. Very well, Marcus agreed, though his expression suggested he was far from satisfied with this arrangement. But, know this, Adrian, the council's patience with your human sympathies is wearing thin. They remember what happened the last time one of our kind became too attached to a mortal. With that ominous warning, Marcus melted back into the shadows with the same supernatural speed he had demonstrated earlier, leaving Maya alone with Adrian in the quiet alley. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Maya's mind was reeling from everything she had learned, and she could barely process the fact that she was standing next to a creature she had thought existed only in movies and books. I know this is overwhelming, Adrian said gently. You have every right to be frightened and confused. I am frightened, Maya admitted. But, not of you. That other vampire, Marcus, he was going to kill me, wasn't he? He was considering it, Adrian confirmed. The council believes that eliminating potential exposure is the safest course of action. And, you disagree? Adrian moved closer to her, but stopped when he saw her tense up. I believe that hiding from humanity behind a wall of fear and violence is no way to exist. We are stronger than humans, yes, but that should make us protectors, not predators. Is that why you stepped down as king? Because you disagreed with how vampires were supposed to behave? Partly, Adrian said. I grew tired of making decisions that affected the lives of thousands of vampires worldwide. And I grew tired of pretending that humans were nothing more than a food source when I knew better. Maya looked at him carefully in the dim streetlight. Have you ever killed anyone? For food? Adrian's expression became pained. Yes. In my younger days, before I learned to control my nature, I took human life to sustain myself. It is something I have regretted for centuries. But, not recently? Not for over 200 years, Adrian said firmly. I learned to feed without killing, to take only what I needed from volunteers who were compensated for their contribution. Most vampires consider this weak and foolish, but I could no longer justify murder for the sake of convenience. Maya absorbed this information slowly. So vampires don't actually have to kill people to survive? No, Adrian confirmed. But many choose to because it is easier and because they view humans as inferior beings whose lives have no value. That's horrible, Maya said, and she meant it. The casual disregard for human life that Adrian described was more frightening than the existence of vampires themselves. It is one of the reasons I chose to distance myself from vampire society, Adrian explained. I could no longer participate in or condone such attitudes. Maya found herself studying Adrian's face, looking for signs of the monster Marcus had implied he was. But all she saw was the same gentle, lonely man who had treated her with such unexpected kindness. What happens now? She asked. Will the council really try to kill me? Not while I am here to prevent it, Adrian said firmly. But I must meet with them and try to find a solution that keeps you safe. What if they don't listen to you? What if they decide you're too much of a risk too? Adrian's smile was grim but determined. Then, I will remind them why I was king for 5 centuries, and why challenging me is not a decision they should make lightly. Maya felt a chill that had nothing to do with the evening air. You would fight them? For me? If necessary, Adrian said simply. Why? Maya asked again. I still don't understand why you would risk so much for someone you barely know. Adrian was quiet for a long moment, and, when he spoke, his voice was soft and honest. Because in all my centuries of existence, you are the first human who looked at me and saw someone worth saving. Not because you knew what I was or what power I wielded, but simply because you believed every life had value. Maya felt tears prick her eyes at the simple honesty in his words. That's what anyone should have done. But it isn't what most people would have done, Adrian countered. And it isn't what any vampire would have done. You risked your life for a stranger, Maya, and that kind of selfless courage is rarer than you know. They walked back to Maya's apartment building in silence, both lost in their own thoughts. Maya was still struggling to accept the reality of vampires, but she was beginning to understand that her simple act of heroism had set forces in motion that were far beyond her control. Will I see you again after tomorrow night? She asked as they reached her building. I hope so, Adrian said. But I cannot make promises about what the council might demand. And if they demand that you never see me again? Adrian's amber eyes met hers, and Maya saw determination there that both thrilled and frightened her. Then, I will have to decide what matters more to me, the approval of the council or the chance to know you better. That's a dangerous choice to have to make, Maya said quietly. Perhaps, Adrian agreed. But some things are worth the risk. After Adrian disappeared into the shadows with the same supernatural speed she was beginning to associate with vampires, Maya climbed the stairs to her apartment and tried to process everything that had happened. She sat by her window looking out at the city and wondered how many other supernatural creatures might be living hidden lives among the human population. More importantly, she wondered what tomorrow night's meeting would bring. Would Adrian be able to convince the council that she wasn't a threat? Or would she wake up to find herself hunted by creatures far more dangerous than anything she had faced on the streets? As she finally drifted off to sleep, Maya found herself thinking about the look in Adrian's eyes when he had spoken about risking everything for the chance to know her better. In just a few weeks, her life had gone from hopeless to magical to terrifying, and she was beginning to realize that her feelings for Adrian were becoming much more complicated than simple gratitude. What she didn't know was that Adrian was at that very moment standing before the Vampire Council in an underground chamber deep beneath the city. 12 ancient vampires sat in a semicircle, their eyes glowing in the darkness as they debated her fate. The human knows our secret, said Victoria Ashworth, the council's current leader. The law is clear about how such situations must be handled. The law was written in a different time, Adrian replied calmly. When exposure meant persecution and death for our kind. Times have changed. Have they? Asked another council member, a vampire so old his skin was nearly translucent. Humans still fear what they do not understand. One human tells another, word spreads, and soon we have hunters at our doors again. Maya Chen is not going to betray us, Adrian insisted. She understands the importance of secrecy. How can you be certain? Victoria demanded. What hold do you have over this human that guarantees her silence? Adrian paused, knowing that his answer would determine not just Maya's fate, but his own standing within vampire society. Because she is under my personal protection, and because I believe her to be trustworthy. Belief is not certainty, Victoria said coldly. And your judgment regarding humans has been questionable in the past. The reference was to Adrian's last attempt at a relationship with a human, over a century ago. That situation had ended badly when the woman had learned the truth and tried to expose vampires to the world. The council had been forced to take drastic action, and Adrian's faith in human nature had been severely shaken. Maya is different, Adrian said firmly. Prove it, Victoria challenged. Submit to a blood bond with this human. Let us see her thoughts and intentions directly. Adrian felt his jaw tighten. A blood bond would create a permanent psychic connection between him and Maya, allowing him to sense her thoughts and emotions at all times. It would also make her partially dependent on him, which was not something he wanted to force on her. That is an extreme measure, Adrian said. These are extreme circumstances, Victoria replied. You claim this human can be trusted. Let the bond prove it, or let us handle the situation in the traditional manner. Adrian knew there was no real choice. Either he agreed to the blood bond, or the council would vote to have Maya killed. And, while he was powerful enough to protect her from individual vampires like Marcus, he could not fight the entire council and their followers. Very well, Adrian agreed reluctantly. I will propose the bond to her. But, the choice must be hers to make freely. She has until tomorrow night to decide, Victoria said. If she refuses, or if the bond reveals any intention to betray our secret, she dies. These are our terms, Adrian. Accept them or watch your precious human burn. Adrian bowed formally to the council, though his expression remained defiant. I understand your terms. But, know this, if any harm comes to Maya Chen through treachery or broken promises, I will consider it a declaration of war against me personally. The chamber fell silent at this pronouncement. Even Victoria looked taken aback by the directness of Adrian's threat. For a vampire to declare war against the council was almost unheard of, and the implications were staggering. You would truly risk everything for this one human? Victoria asked. I would, Adrian replied without hesitation. Because she represents something I thought was lost to the world, genuine goodness without expectation of reward. That is worth protecting, whatever the cost. As Adrian left the council chamber, he knew that he had just committed himself to a course of action that could reshape vampire society forever. Tomorrow, he would have to ask Maya to bind her life to his in ways she couldn't possibly understand, or watch her die for the crime of showing him kindness. Either way, both of their lives were about to change forever. Maya woke the next morning to find Adrian sitting quietly in the chair by her window, silhouetted against the early sunlight streaming through the glass. For a moment, she thought she was dreaming, but then, he turned to look at her with those familiar amber eyes, and reality came flooding back. How long have you been here? She asked, sitting up and running her fingers through her tangled hair. Since before dawn, Adrian replied. I wanted to be here when you woke up to explain what the council has decided. Maya's stomach dropped. The formal tone in his voice told her that the news wasn't good. They want me dead, don't they? They have offered an alternative, Adrian said carefully. Though it is not without significant consequences for both of us. Maya wrapped her arms around her knees, trying to prepare herself for whatever he was about to tell her. What kind of alternative? Adrian was quiet for a long moment, as if choosing his words carefully. There is something called a blood bond. It is a permanent psychic connection between a vampire and a human that allows each to sense the thoughts and emotions of the other. The council believes that if you agree to this bond with me, they will be able to monitor your intentions and ensure that you never betray our secret. And, if I refuse? They will vote to have you killed, Adrian said bluntly. I am powerful enough to protect you from individual vampires, but not from the entire council and their followers. Maya absorbed this information slowly. So my choice is to bind my mind to yours forever or die? That is essentially correct, Adrian confirmed. Though I should explain that the bond is not as invasive as it might sound. It creates a connection that allows us to sense each other's general emotional state and location, and, in moments of extreme emotion or danger, we might catch glimpses of each other's thoughts. But, day to day, your mind would remain your own. But, it's permanent? Yes, Adrian said quietly. The bond cannot be broken except by death. Maya got out of bed and walked to the window, looking out at the city she had called home for most of her life. Yesterday she had been worried about finding a job and paying rent. Today she was being asked to bind her soul to an immortal vampire or face execution by a supernatural council. There's something else, isn't there? She asked, noting the tension in Adrian's voice. Something you haven't told me yet. Adrian sighed. The bond would also extend your natural lifespan significantly. Not immortality, but you would age much more slowly than normal humans. You might live for several centuries instead of decades. Maya turned to stare at him. You're telling me that agreeing to this bond would make me almost immortal? It would make you long-lived, Adrian corrected. And it would tie your life force to mine. If I were to die, you would die as well. And the extended life comes with a price. You would need to feed on blood occasionally, though nothing like what full vampires require. Maya felt overwhelmed by the magnitude of what he was describing. You're asking me to become something that's not quite human anymore. I am asking you to save your life, Adrian said gently. The council has given us until sunset tonight to provide them with an answer. Maya returned to her bed and sat down heavily. What do you want me to do? I want you to live, Adrian said simply. Whatever choice allows that to happen is the one I support. But, what about what you want personally? Maya pressed. Would you want to be bonded to me for centuries? Sharing thoughts and emotions with someone you barely know? Adrian stood and moved closer to her, his expression becoming more vulnerable than she had ever seen it. Maya, I have lived for over 600 years. I have watched empires rise and fall, seen humanity evolve and change in ways both beautiful and terrible. In all that time, I have never met anyone who challenged my understanding of the world the way you have in just a few weeks. What do you mean? I mean that your compassion and selflessness have reminded me of qualities I thought were extinct in the modern world, Adrian explained. Being bonded to you would not be a burden, it would be a privilege. Maya felt her cheeks flush at the intensity of his words. Adrian, I need to understand something. Are you asking me to do this because it's the only way to save my life, or because you want to be connected to me? Adrian sat down on the edge of the bed, close enough that she could see the flecks of gold in his amber eyes. Both, he admitted honestly. I would propose this bond to save your life even if I had no personal feelings involved. But, I cannot deny that the thought of being connected to you, of sharing that kind of intimacy with someone I admire so deeply, is appealing. Admire? Maya repeated softly. More than admire, Adrian said, his voice becoming even quieter. Maya, I think I am falling in love with you. The words hung in the air between them, and Maya felt her heart start racing. That's impossible. You've known me for less than a month. I have lived long enough to recognize something extraordinary when I encounter it, Adrian replied. And, what I feel for you is unlike anything I have experienced in 6 centuries of existence. Maya looked into his eyes and saw complete sincerity there. What if the bond changes how you feel? What if being connected to my thoughts makes you realize you don't actually like me as much as you think you do? Adrian's smile was gentle and sad. Then, at least you will be alive to discover that. And, I will have the memories of these few weeks when I believed in the possibility of love again. Maya stood and walked to her small kitchen, needing some distance to think clearly. Everything about this situation was insane, but the alternative was death at the hands of creatures she couldn't hope to fight or escape. If I agree to this, she said slowly, what happens to my life? Can I still try to find work, maybe go back to school someday? Or would I have to live in hiding? The bond would actually make those things easier, Adrian explained. As someone connected to me, you would have access to resources and protection that would allow you to pursue any life you wanted. Education, career, travel, all of it would be possible. And, you? Would you go back to ruling vampires? Would I be bonded to a king who has to make life and death decisions about people like me? Adrian considered this question carefully. The council has been pushing me to resume active leadership. They believe my involvement with you proves that I am too removed from vampire society and that my judgment has become compromised. Ironically, bonding with you might force me back into a role I had hoped to avoid. Because they would see the bond as proof that you can control your feelings for humans? Exactly. They would interpret it as me choosing duty and vampire law over human sentiment. Maya poured herself a glass of water, though her hands were shaking slightly. But, that's not why you would be doing it. No, Adrian agreed. I would be doing it because I cannot bear the thought of a world without you in it. The simple honesty of his statement made Maya's eyes fill with tears. Adrian, I'm scared. In an instant, he was beside her, moving with that supernatural speed that still startled her. Of the bond? Of me? Or of the council? Of all of it, Maya admitted. 3 weeks ago, I was sleeping under a bridge and my biggest worry was finding enough money for food. Now I'm being asked to bond my soul to a vampire king and live for centuries. It's too much to process. Adrian gently took her hands in his, and Maya was struck again by how cold his skin was. I understand your fear. What I am asking of you is enormous, and you have every right to be overwhelmed. What if I'm not strong enough for this kind of life? Maya asked. What if being connected to you and your world changes me into someone I don't recognize? Then, I will be there to help you find your way back to yourself, Adrian promised. The bond works both ways, Maya. You would be able to sense my thoughts and emotions just as I could sense yours. If you ever felt lost or frightened, you would know that you were not alone. Maya looked down at their joined hands, noting the stark contrast between her warm, human skin and his pale, cold fingers. And if you regret the bond later? If being connected to someone mortal becomes a burden? That could never happen, Adrian said firmly. Maya, you saved my life without knowing who or what I was. You showed me kindness when you had nothing to gain from it. Being connected to that kind of goodness could never be a burden. Maya pulled her hands free and walked back to the window. The sun was higher now, and the streets below were filled with people going about their normal human lives. She wondered if any of them would believe what she was being asked to consider. How much time do I have to decide? She asked. The council expects an answer by sunset, Adrian replied. But, Maya, I need you to understand something important. If you agree to this bond, there will be no going back. Your life will be tied to mine for as long as we both exist. You need to be certain this is what you want. Maya turned to face him again. What happens during the bonding ceremony? Is it painful? We would each drink a small amount of the other's blood while reciting an ancient binding oath, Adrian explained. There is usually some discomfort as the psychic connection forms, but nothing unbearable. The process takes only a few minutes. And, afterward? Afterward, we would be connected in ways that go beyond the physical. You would be able to sense my location and emotional state, and I would be able to sense yours. In times of danger or extreme emotion, the connection would strengthen, allowing us to share thoughts and even physical sensations. Maya tried to imagine what it would be like to have another consciousness touching the edges of her mind for the rest of her life. It was both terrifying and strangely comforting. Adrian, she said quietly, if I do this, I need you to promise me something. Anything. Promise me that you won't let the bond change who I am. I know I'm not sophisticated or educated like the people in your world probably are, but I don't want to lose the parts of myself that you say you admire. Adrian's expression became intensely serious. Maya, I fell in love with exactly who you are right now. Your compassion, your courage, your refusal to let hardship make you bitter or cruel, these are the qualities that drew me to you. I would never want you to change those aspects of yourself. And, you promise you won't try to control me through the bond? I know you're used to being in charge, but I need to know that my thoughts and decisions will still be my own. I promise, Adrian said solemnly. The bond is meant to connect us, not to dominate or control. Your free will is sacred to me, Maya. I would never violate it. Maya walked back to him and looked up into his amber eyes. Then, yes, she said quietly. I agree to the bond. Adrian's expression was a mixture of relief, joy, and concern. Are you certain? Once we begin the ceremony, there is no stopping it. I'm certain, Maya said, though her voice trembled slightly. I'd rather live a strange, supernatural life with someone who cares about me than die because I was afraid to take a chance. Adrian cupped her face gently in his cold hands. Maya, I want you to know that regardless of what the council believes, this bond is not about controlling you or ensuring your silence. For me, it is about choosing to share my existence with the most remarkable person I have ever encountered. And, for me, Maya said, surprised by her own certainty, it's about choosing to trust someone who has shown me more kindness than I've received in years. Whatever happens, I know you'll protect me. Adrian leaned down and kissed her forehead gently. With my life, he promised. They spent the rest of the day talking about what Maya could expect from her new existence. Adrian explained that while she wouldn't become a full vampire, the bond would grant her enhanced strength and speed, improved healing abilities, and the extended lifespan he had mentioned. She would also develop an enhanced sensitivity to supernatural presences, which would help her navigate the hidden world she was about to enter. Will I still be able to eat normal food? Maya asked, trying to focus on practical concerns to keep from panicking about the magnitude of what she was about to do. Yes, Adrian assured her. Though you may find that you need less food than before, and occasionally you will crave blood. I can provide that for you safely. It doesn't require taking from unwilling donors. What about sunlight? Will it hurt me? Not significantly. You may find yourself more sensitive to bright light, and you'll probably prefer nighttime hours, but you won't burn or suffer the way full vampires do. As evening approached, Adrian's demeanor became more serious. We should prepare for the ceremony. The council will want to witness the bonding to ensure it is completed properly. Maya felt her nervousness return full force. Will they all be there? Watching us? The core council members, yes. But, Maya, you don't have to fear them once the bond is complete. As my bonded companion, you will be afforded the same respect and protection that I am. They traveled to the council chambers through a series of underground tunnels that Maya hadn't known existed beneath Seattle. The passages were ancient, carved from stone and lit by torches that cast dancing shadows on the walls. Adrian held her hand as they walked, and Maya could feel some of his confidence flowing through their tentative connection. The chamber where the ceremony would take place was circular and dominated by a raised platform in the center. 12 vampires sat in ornate chairs arranged in a semicircle around the platform, their eyes glowing in the dim light. Maya recognized Victoria Ashworth and Marcus from Adrian's descriptions, but the others were strangers with faces that looked both ageless and impossibly old. Adrian Blackwood, Victoria said formally as they entered the chamber. Have you and the human reached a decision? We have, Adrian replied, his voice carrying the authority Maya was beginning to associate with his royal bearing. Maya Chen has agreed to the blood bond freely and willingly. And, you understand, human, Victoria addressed Maya directly, that this bond will tie your life to Adrian's permanently? That you will share his extended existence and be subject to our laws regarding secrecy and conduct? Maya's voice was steadier than she felt. I understand. Then, let the ceremony begin, Victoria announced. Adrian led Maya to the platform in the center of the chamber. From somewhere in his jacket, he produced an ornate silver chalice that looked ancient and incredibly valuable. He also withdrew a small, ceremonial knife with symbols carved into its blade. Are you ready? He asked quietly, and Maya could sense his concern for her through their growing connection. Yes, she whispered. Adrian took the knife and made a small cut across his palm, letting several drops of his dark blood fall into the chalice. Then, he handed the knife to Maya, who hesitated for just a moment before copying his action. Her bright red blood mixed with his, creating a swirling pattern in the bottom of the cup. Now we drink, Adrian explained softly. You first. Maya took the chalice with shaking hands and raised it to her lips. Adrian's blood tasted metallic and strangely warm, with an underlying flavor she couldn't identify. As soon as she swallowed, she felt a tingling sensation spreading from her stomach outward through her entire body. Adrian took the cup from her and drank the remaining mixture. As he swallowed, his eyes began to glow brighter, and Maya felt something shifting in her mind, like a door opening to let in light from another room. Now the oath, Adrian said, and his voice seemed to echo strangely in Maya's ears. Together, they recited words in a language Maya didn't recognize but somehow understood. By blood given freely, by choice made willingly, by trust offered completely, we bind ourselves across time and space, in life and beyond death, two souls sharing one existence until the end of days. As the final words were spoken, Maya felt a rushing sensation, as if she was falling and flying at the same time. The connection between her and Adrian exploded into full awareness, and suddenly, she could feel his emotions as clearly as her own, his love for her, his relief that she was safe, his wonder at the strength of the bond forming between them. At the same time, she could sense Adrian experiencing her feelings, her fear mixing with excitement, her amazement at the supernatural world she was entering, and, beneath it all, a growing warmth that she realized was her own developing love for him. The ceremony was over in minutes, but Maya felt fundamentally changed. She could sense Adrian's presence in her mind like a warm, comforting weight. More than that, she could feel his strength flowing through the bond, making her feel more powerful and confident than she ever had before. "It is done," Victoria announced, though her expression remained disapproving. "The human is now bonded to you, Adrian. We trust this will resolve any concerns about her discretion regarding our existence." "It will," Adrian replied firmly. Through the bond, Maya could feel his determination to protect her from any future threats from the council. "Then, this matter is closed," Victoria said. "Though we expect you to resume your duties as king now that you have demonstrated your commitment to our laws and traditions." Adrian bowed formally. "I will consider the council's request for my return to active leadership." As they left the council chambers, Maya marveled at how different she felt. Her senses seemed sharper, her body stronger, and there was a constant awareness of Adrian's presence in her mind that was comforting rather than intrusive. "How do you feel?" Adrian asked as they emerged into the night air. "Different," Maya said honestly. "But, good different. I can feel you there, in my mind, but it's not overwhelming like I thought it would be." "The bond will strengthen over time," Adrian explained. "As we become more accustomed to sharing our thoughts and emotions, the connection will become even more natural." Maya stopped walking and turned to face him. "Adrian, there's something I need to tell you." "What is it?" "When the bond formed, I felt your emotions, and I realized something about my own feelings." Maya took a deep breath. "I'm falling in love with you too." Adrian's smile was radiant. "I hoped you might, but I didn't want to pressure you to feel something that wasn't genuine." "It's genuine," Maya assured him. "I think it started that first night when you looked at me like I was someone worth saving." No one had ever looked at me like that before. Adrian pulled her into his arms, and Maya marveled at how perfectly she fit against him. "You are worth saving, Maya Chen. You are worth everything." As they stood together in the moonlight, Maya realized that her life had taken a turn she could never have imagined. She was no longer homeless, no longer alone, and no longer entirely human. She was bonded to an immortal vampire king who loved her, connected to a supernatural world that most people didn't know existed, and facing a future that stretched out for centuries instead of decades. It should have been terrifying, but, instead, Maya felt more hopeful than she had since her parents died. For the first time in years, she had someone who truly cared about her, someone who saw value in who she was rather than what she could provide. "So what happens now?" she asked, looking up into Adrian's amber eyes. "Now," Adrian said, leaning down to kiss her gently, "we build a life together. We learn to navigate this bond, we face whatever challenges the supernatural world throws at us, and we prove to everyone, including the council, that love between humans and vampires is possible." "And if the council tries to cause problems for us?" Adrian's expression became determined and slightly dangerous. "Then, they will discover that a vampire king who has something precious to protect is far more formidable than one who has nothing left to lose." Maya smiled and reached up to touch his face. "I love you, Adrian Blackwood. And I'm not afraid of whatever comes next." "I love you too, Maya Chen," Adrian replied. "And, with you beside me, I believe anything is possible." As they walked hand in hand through the quiet streets of Seattle, both of them could feel the bond between them growing stronger with each passing moment. Maya had saved Adrian from drowning, but, in return, he had saved her from a life of loneliness and despair. Together, they faced an uncertain future, but it was a future they would navigate as equals, bound by love and an unbreakable connection that transcended the boundaries between human and vampire. The homeless girl who had pulled a stranger from a sinking car had become something unprecedented in vampire history, a human bonded to one of the most powerful vampires in existence, not as a servant or a food source, but as a true partner and equal. And the ancient vampire king who had grown weary of his immortal existence had found new purpose in protecting and cherishing the remarkable woman who had reminded him that courage and compassion still existed in the world. Their story was just beginning, but Maya knew that whatever challenges lay ahead, she would face them with the strength that came from being truly loved for the first time in her life. And Adrian knew that he had found something worth fighting for, something worth ruling for, and something worth living for, even if that life stretched on for eternity. The council might question their bond, other vampires might challenge their relationship, and the human world might never understand what Maya had become. But none of that mattered as long as they had each other. Love had triumphed over fear, compassion had defeated prejudice, and two souls from different worlds had found their way to each other through an act of heroism that had changed both of their lives forever. In the end, Maya's unbelievable reaction to saving a vampire king's life had been to fall in love with him, just as his unbelievable reaction to being saved by a homeless girl had been to offer her everything he had to give. It was a love story that defied every rule of both human and vampire society, but it was also proof that sometimes the most impossible things are the ones most worth believing in.